Greetings, cinephiles. Are you looking for a movie analysis podcast that stands above the rest? Then look no further than Collateral Cinema, the only movie podcast that matters.
We analyze good movies, we analyze bad movies, and yes, we also analyze the in-betweens of the world of cinema.
So if you like what you hear, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.
And yes, my friends, we are 420 friendly. So when you listen to us, smoke it if you've got it. And now, here's a new episode of Collateral Gaming. The show starts right now.
I'm Ashley Chancellor.
And I'm Zachary Gio.
And this is Collateral Gaming Game Launch.
Welcome to Collateral Gaming, the only video game podcast that matters, where we focus on good games, bad games, and everything else in between in the world of gaming. We are podcasting straight from the United States of America, and yes, my friends, we are indeed a 420-friendly podcast, so whatever you have, smoke it if you got it, unless it's illegal, because we don't want none of that shit. So, Ash, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, buddy, I am doing well. Happy to be doing this episode finally. Because
dude,
I mean,
oh yeah, dude, it's been a long fucking time coming. I'm excited.
I know we've been really hyping up this game since its announcement. Up until the release, you and I were there. We were so stoked for this, and it's finally here, and we finally had a few weeks to play it. So
yeah, dude, the sheer amount of just pure speculation that you and I did around this game. I mean, it was announced during the June Direct. Was it June or July?
I don't remember, one of the two.
It's one of the months that start with J. But no, that Direct honestly was the greatest Nintendo Direct I've ever bore witness to, because it literally started with something that we're going to talk about later when we kind of like bust out a little bit of news before we get chatting. But this game went from just being completely unbeknownst to anybody to being on our Switches with us playing through it in less than 4 months. And to me, that is just crazy. And that's proper marketing. It's kind of like what Nintendo did with Metroid Dread when they announced it back in 21. Mm-hmm. They gave us the trailer in June and they were like, oh, hey, by the way, this is coming out in October. And not only were people shitting the bed because we got Metroid 5 after, I don't even know how long, 19 years they waited to continue the story?
Yeah, something like that.
People were also going to get their hands on it in less than half a year. And that blows everybody's minds, because 9 times out of 10 with these big AAA studios and video games and, overall, titles, I guess series, that's the word I'm looking for. We heard about Tears of the Kingdom 2 years prior to its release, and that wait was agonizing. But when Nintendo actually got their shit together and gave us like the release of a game, and it's just beautiful. And that's exactly what we got with this. And it was really special because not only was it another Zelda game, but it was also another top-down 2D Zelda game that was a fresh adventure we had never seen before. It wasn't a remake. It wasn't a remaster. It was a brand new original story from the Legend of Zelda series where you actually got to play as Princess Zelda. And it was spectacular. And of course, is the Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Now, of course, today is going to be kind of like a spoiler-free episode that we're doing. We're just going to kind of get into our first impressions and what we think about the game. And we want to give everybody who listens to this some time to actually dive in and enjoy it for yourself, because Ash and I have both beaten it, and it is quite a fantastic title. But we're just going to talk about first impressions and stuff like that. But before we get into that, dude, there's a lot of stuff that's coming. Not just Echoes of Wisdom that has been released, but a lot of stuff that's inbound that is really exciting. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, is on Friday, we have the release of Call of Duty Black Ops 6, which, for those of you who listen to episodes that I'm a part of, you guys know that I'm a huge Call of Duty fan. And this one is even more special because my brother Ash here is flying his ass out to where I am, and we're gonna enjoy the launch and do a launch episode together. And I'm stoked. I am so fucking excited. Danielle and I are both looking forward to having you out here. It's gonna be a great time. And I'm gonna stop talking and let you hop in because I've been just going at it.
No, yeah, man. I'm so fucking excited to come out there with you and to be able to enjoy the launch of that game together. And Call of Duty Black Ops 6 actually looks like it might be a good Call of Duty game. So, and that's something we haven't had in a while.
Fucking finally, bro.
At least per the community. I mean, my experience is somewhat limited, but yeah, I'm really fucking stoked about it. Also, next month we are getting Mario and Luigi Brothership, which we'll be covering.
Yes, bro. November 7th, dude. And it's crazy because when all of this shit was announced, like I said, that Nintendo Direct blew me away because it started with Mario and Luigi Brothership. This is like the first Mario and Luigi RPG title that we've gotten in like what, 7, 8 years? The last one was like 2015 and it was Brothers in Time or something like that. I don't actually remember because the only other Mario and Luigi RPG games I've played are Superstar Saga and the remaster of Super Mario RPG for the Switch. I haven't played Bowser's Inside Story or Brothers in Time or any of the other ones, and this game that's coming out on the 7th of November, it's kind of a return to form for me because it kind of makes me want to go back and try to get my hands on these other ones because I have a 3DS. And the last thing I played on it was A Link Between Worlds, going back through it because that game's fantastic too. And there's just so much coming, dude. It's awesome.
Dude, so much. And we are finally getting Metroid Prime 4 hopefully next year. And at least we actually got an announcement about it. See, and that's the thing that kind of fills me with hope about that because, you know, Nintendo has a tendency to only drop games shortly after they're announced, unless they're just really big. You know, as we see cases like with Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, but with like Metroid Dread, with Echoes of Wisdom, what they did is they made sure that the game was basically almost complete before they announced it. And so for people that feel disheartened by the fact that we went so many years without knowledge of Prime 4, that should come as some comfort that the fact that they're announcing it now means that, you know, they're nearing the completion of stage of the game. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, when they announced it back in 2017, all we got was like a dark blue kind of like theme shot or a screenshot that was like in space, and you just saw 4. And it was like now into or Metroid Prime, and then the 4 slid to the right, and you just saw Metroid Prime 4. And the world went nuts. The Metroid world, anyways. Everybody who's a fan of that game knows that. I mean, right now it has been 17 years since the last Metroid Prime game. Metroid has made a massive comeback in the past 4 years, dude. I mean, Mercury Steam kind of took the reins with the remake of Return of Samus, with Samus Returns for the Nintendo DS back in 2017. And that game was awesome, but it was a little clunky, and it was a remake of probably one of the less well-received Metroid games. Although they did a fantastic job with it, implementing that 2.5D style with the cutscenes and the gameplay and all that stuff, and it was awesome. But then we got the reveal for Prime 4 that it was coming, that it was in the works, that Nintendo hadn't forgotten about that series because it was a very well-loved series by Metroid fans. I mean, you know, Metroid Prime is one of my favorite games, if not my favorite game of all time. I love that game. And the fact that they announced it after what is now, it's been 7 years since the announcement. So 10 years later, they announced the 4th title. And 7 years later, it's still in development, and they finally give us a trailer. And that's what they end the Direct with, which to me lets me know that Nintendo has a lot of faith in this title and a lot of faith in the franchise because they've been doing so much work to revive it. Yeah. And that gives me a lot of hope. I'm okay with them announcing the game like a year or 2 out because I want it to be perfect. But Nintendo has a track record of announcing things shortly before it comes out, and I'm okay with that too. Give me quality, because Nintendo is not known for quantity, but they are known for quality. You know for a fact that almost all of their games are where they should be at launch, which is something that is sorely missing from the video game industry nowadays. Unless you've got like bigger titles like God of War. But even then, sometimes those titles have issues.
But then you have something like Echoes of Wisdom, which was you can tell was developed within a short time frame, and yet still feels like a polished product. It's just a very
Yeah.
quick, short and sweet adventure, and it's definitely the breath of fresh air I think we all needed. By the way, this was announced back in June. I looked it up.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So co-developed by Nintendo and Grezzo. Grezzo's kind of like the Mercury Steam of the Zelda franchise. Nintendo gave them the opportunity to remake and remaster some of their old Zelda games, and they proved their worth with that. And now they're letting them kind of do their own original adventures. So I understand Grezzo was also behind A Link Between Worlds and Triforce Heroes, as well as the Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 3D remakes. So
Oh wow! I thought that they had just done A Link to the Past, or not A Link to the Past. Sorry, Link's Awakening, and that's huge. I didn't know that.
and the Link's
'Cause-
Awakening remake, of course, yeah.
Oh, dude, that's incredible. That means that Grezzo is probably going to be, unless something happens, which God forbid, because they have done an amazing job. They need to stabilize their frame rate, but everything else is perfect.
That might just be the fault of the hardware. It might just be that they're not able to actually get these games to run a consistent 60 frames on the Switch hardware. And I think Nintendo's probably banking on their new hardware, Switch 2 or whatever, to be a much higher level console that's going to be able to run these games much more consistently.
Oh, dude, like the fact of the matter is, I think that with this next console release, there's still so much that we don't know. We don't even know what it's officially going to be called. But we do know that the hardware is going to be light years ahead of anything that Nintendo has ever released, and will finally put them in that era of technology where no game is going to run poorly or look bad. And that's exciting because from what I've heard, in the docked, the whatever it is, let's call it the Switch 2 for now. Docked, I think the Switch 2 is going to run basically like an Xbox Series S, which is huge because that's Microsoft's most recent it's the smaller version of Microsoft's most recent console, but that's still huge because it can run games at solid stable frame rates at very high resolutions, and that's awesome. And dock or handheld, it's going to run like a PS4 Pro. That's insane to me because the PS4 Pro to this day is still my favorite console that I've ever owned. I loved that thing. The amount of customization you could do with it, the stability of all the titles that you played, how many options it gave you as far as customization in game and how you could view the games or how they felt, the differences between performance and fidelity. That console gave you the option to experience games in multiple ways. And I'm excited with what Nintendo does with their new hardware. If it's called the Switch 2 though, I'll be a little disappointed. I think that's not that creative. I would love it if they called it something like the Super Nintendo Switch. That would be so cool.
That would be awesome.
It would be. It would be. Or like the Switch Plus or something like that. I don't know. But we'll know. We'll figure it out.
Switch Plus kind of sounds too much like Switch Pro. Like
Yeah, that is true.
It's not distinctive
But
enough. But yeah, something like either new Nintendo Switch or Switch 2, I think is probably their best bet. With the way to market this as being a continuation, a successor to the Switch, and to run on a lot of the same principles, but manage to be an entirely new console, like the Wii U.
Yeah, which let's hope it does better than the Wii U does. Let's be honest, because I know that they're probably going to start with backwards compatibility like the Wii U did, but the Wii U kind of tanked pretty hard with its success. And if the Switch 2 is going to be backwards compatible, I wonder how many people are going to jump at the opportunity to get this new console when they still have the Switch, especially since they released the OLED a couple years ago.
That and I hope that the virtual console library that they've been slowly rolling out with the Switch, having discarded everything they had on the eShop before, carries over, because it took us this long just to build up a library that's even remotely as good as the Wii U.
I honestly don't think Nintendo's going to make that kind of mistake. I think with how much effort and time they've put into these NSO libraries, I think that they would be foolish to not take it over. And if they don't, they will probably lose, I would say, 35 to 40% of their fan base, because a lot of people that play Nintendo today play it because of nostalgia. Granted, the titles are awesome and fun, but that's the newer stuff for the younger generations that are also getting into video games. The older generations like us, we play Nintendo games still because they still carry the same titles and same franchises that we know and love while giving us access to the older ones. Which, I mean, Ash, you know, last week for the Omega Metroid podcast and their website, I played through Metroid 1, Nestroid, the very first one for the first time. And I actually had a great time. It beat my ass into the ground.
I was about to say,
but
I'm sorry that you had to do that.
to be honest, I recommend playing it. It's kind of fun. I made it all the way through the game, and I almost ripped my hair out trying to escape from Torian. But you know what? Platforming on the Nintendo Entertainment System is no joke, bro. It's hard.
Yeah,
So
I imagine so. But
yeah, it was rough.
But today we're here to talk about The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom.
Oh yeah.
It's from what I understand, most of the visionary direction was Nintendo, but Grezzo did most of the heavy lifting. And that should come as no surprise because, you know, Nintendo or their core team is probably hard at work on the next Zelda game already.
Yeah.
So outsourcing something like this to Grezzo is definitely the best thing that the Nintendo can do. I mean, we know already from our review of the Oracle games that, you know, Nintendo's no stranger to outsourcing some of these, I don't want to say spin-off titles, but they're the titles that come in between the very major ones. You know, with which Nintendo did before with Capcom and now with Grezzo, who they seem to have a long-running relationship with. And boy, am I impressed with what they've managed to churn out together this time, because this game feels like a perfect fusion of traditional Zelda and a lot of the design philosophies that were introduced in the open world titles, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, playing in the game, one thing that they've shown us in the trailers is that they've brought back stuff like ingredients for things that you can make in the game. And they've shown us that you can do smoothies and stuff like that. And they kind of did the same thing where you can face enemies in the open world and beat hordes of monsters to gain like a smoothie ingredient, but it's a lot more streamlined to where it's more convenient. There are some issues that I take with it, but all in all, I think they did a really good job of balancing out reward systems to where it feels like there's not a lot of circumstances where you feel like you've been cheated, because you can actually use most of the stuff that you find in the open world, and there's a lot more rewards and a lot more Easter eggs too. Obviously, we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty and we're not going to spoil anything, probably not until next time. We'll talk about it. But there's a lot more lore to dive into in this game. There's a lot of callbacks to previous Zelda titles that, honestly, if you blink, you might miss it. And
True.
I think that they did a really, really good job of the overall balance of the game, which is something that, to me, was sorely missing from both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom, every chest you found was a weapon that you didn't really need, or an ingredient that you were never going to use, or something, a weaker item that you already had stronger versions of that you were never going to fuse to your weapons or arrows. And it was kind of a letdown. Even some of the most intensive puzzles led to things that were basically useless. And that was one of the things I didn't like about Tears of the Kingdom, that Echoes of Wisdom improved upon significantly. And
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that.
So Echoes of Wisdom toys around with a similar concept of player freedom, of allowing you to find powerful items that can, let's be real, break the game and solve puzzles in unintended ways sometimes. But I feel like these gimmicks are a lot better earned, and I feel like the fact that what you're seeking out throughout the world are echoes, these copies of items and monsters and other elements of the game world that you can, you know, copy and paste in. The fact that you have to go and seek those out, I think, really helps. And also, it's cool because in every instance, you have to basically either encounter that item or defeat that monster in order to use it. So there's
Yep.
a sense of satisfaction in that progression where, you know, you don't get to use a monster until you defeated it in combat. And then once you've got your ass handed to by then, there's that satisfying reward of being able to use them in your next combat encounter. So just using the echoes as this item to go around the world and find actually helps tremendously with the reward problem that you're mentioning. Echoes of
Yeah.
Wisdom still suffers somewhat from that. I mean, there are some quests and caves and whatnot that you'll find where the reward doesn't really seem to fit. Like you might just get rupees or more smoothie ingredients because you need a lot more of those, right?
Yeah, you really do. But another thing that Echoes of Wisdom did poorly was rupee management. Excuse me, I have the hiccups, dude. I can't get rid of them. It was rupee management. In Echoes of Wisdom, rupees are a little bit more difficult to come by. And there's actually a lot of stuff that you can purchase that will help with your adventure, which is, again, something else that was missing from the 3D tiles. Sure, you could make potions and stuff like that, or you could buy gear, but once you had a certain amount of strength, it was kind of worthless. You could take different paths and you could manipulate it and have your own play style, but it wasn't as balanced as it should be. From a gameplay standpoint, dude, these hiccups are kicking my ass. I'm fighting so hard to stay alive right now.
Yeah.
But
That's not the terrible problem to have on a podcast in the middle of a podcast episode, right?
it's fun. It's funny though, because listening back, I'm probably gonna laugh my ass off because I mean, once this is edited and posted, I'm probably gonna listen to it while I'm working. But back to what I was talking about, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom added a level of freedom where, from a gameplay standpoint, those are two of the greatest video games ever created. You could literally go and do whatever you wanted, but it kind of took away from the intensity and the enjoyment of the overarching story, which for Zelda fans, I don't care who you are or what your opinion is. No offense intended to anybody listening, but if you're playing a Zelda game and you're not worried about the story, you shouldn't be playing a Zelda game. I mean, if you go back and play Skyward Sword from 2011, you know for a fact Nintendo gives a shit about the story.
Or Twilight Princess. That's another Zelda game, I think.
Exactly.
That
exactly.
does story really, really well. And this story, by comparison, in Echoes of Wisdom, is a little bit more simple, but I think it's actually,
there.
I think it's actually just perfect for what it does. And yes, I think the linearity helps it quite a bit because there's an open-ended structure to the map of Echoes of Wisdom, but it has a structure that's kind of more similar to A Link Between Worlds, where you'll be able to tackle, you go to your first dungeon, clear that, and then you have a choice of 2 more dungeons, which you can do in any order, and then you clear those, and then you have a choice of, in this case, 3 more dungeons you can do, and after of course Hyrule Castle, which is its own dungeon, and then the final dungeon. So I think it does a really good job of giving you the option to go in multiple different directions at any time.
Yeah.
But it tells its story linearly, which works to its benefit.
Like there are things you have to do in order to trigger the next event. And I really appreciate that because it's not as open-ended. And another thing that I really appreciate is the fact that it takes genuine effort and sequencing to get to these dungeons. And I could say it a million times, again, something that was missing from the last 2 3D titles. Of course, there were things that you had to do before going to a specific dungeon, but it felt like there was something missing. It felt like it wasn't enough. It wasn't challenging enough. And the fact that you can't just go straight to the final boss in Echoes of Wisdom, you actually have to earn the right to get there, brings it back to that old Zelda fashion while keeping it open-ended, which is perfect. It's a beautiful balance. And I really hope that they continue to expand upon that and iron out the kinks that, I'll be honest, are still in Echoes of Wisdom, albeit not as bad as the previous titles, but they're still there. The more they continue to iron it out, dude, I am convinced that the next 3D Zelda is probably going to be one of the greatest games of this millennium.
Yeah.
Like up there with Red Dead 2 and The Witcher 3 and Grand Theft Auto 5, which also Grand Theft Auto 6 next year. It's going to be sick.
Or Elden Ring for that matter.
Elden Ring is an acquired taste, but yes, that game is magnificent. If you are okay with getting your ass absolutely destroyed for the better part of 30 to 40 hours before you get the hang of what it is you're doing, yeah, Elden Ring is a great time.
Yeah, well, you know what though? The design philosophy of the open world and the ability to find things that can break the game is a little bit more similar to Elden Ring than it is to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom in this game.
Yep.
And the way I'll explain that is that you can find echoes that can honestly break the game. Hell, the water dungeon in the game, I didn't realize, but the whole like gimmick of the dungeon is that you have to like raise the water level to get to the boss door, right?
Yeah.
You realize that there's like 50 billion ways to get vertical in this game.
Oh, absolutely, dude. You could literally spawn something to help you get to crawl up the wall. You could use, in the trailer they have water blocks that you can use, and actually I cheesed that dungeon and used water blocks to get up there. But it's a matter of how you want to do it, but there is a set path that you have to take to get there.
But yeah,
and I still appreciate that.
But there is, that one dungeon I think is the only one that you can actually just cheese. But even so, like at least the way that you break the game, and then there was a couple other sequences in the game that I managed to avoid, that I managed to skip just using the right echoes to get verticality. But the fact is you still had to earn those. So unlike in like Tears of the Kingdom, where you can just find the right Zonai parts laying around and use that anywhere, and then once you get auto build, it's just trivial. In Echoes of Wisdom, it's kind of more similar to Elden Ring. That's like, yeah, okay, you can have a crazy build that breaks the game, sure, but you still had to earn it. You still had to go somewhere and find that equipment, in order to be able to do that and grind your character up. And Echoes of Wisdom is somewhat similar to the fact that, you had to go and had to find that echo in the world. Presumably, defeat whatever monster it was to use it. And there's a limit. You can only summon so many echoes at a time, and that you'll be able to upgrade that limit as you progress through the course of the game. So it's honestly perfect.
It really is, and it gives you that sense of progression, that sense of like you're actually earning stuff. The only thing that you could really earn in Tears and Breath of the Wild were heart containers and stamina wheels. And I mean, you could collect Korok seeds and open your inventory, but at a certain point that was pretty much null and void because you're not going to need that much stuff. And with Echoes of Wisdom, you can collect things that increase the strength of your inventory, increase the strength of your outfits, and increase the strength of just your overall energy levels. Because as they showed you in the trailer, Zelda has a sword fighter form, which allows her, after finding a mysterious sword, which allows her to basically channel the abilities of Link. And you can make that ability stronger, which it makes the whole game have a level of drive to it that keeps you wanting to come back. And honestly, it adds to the replayability too, because you can handle different things in different ways while still following that set path. And I really appreciate it. And it's very hard not to spoil things because I so very badly want to talk about the story. Because one thing that Echoes of Wisdom did beautifully was lore.
Yes.
The lore is spectacular. And I am so glad that you and I got to experience this because, man, I can't wait to like dive deeper into it.
Oh, I know. This is it's really good stuff. The lore, the story, the combat. The combat is really, really interesting because, and it's a little awkward at first once you kind of figure it out because you only have a few echoes. So you have to find ways of damaging enemies without directly attacking them until you get the sword fighter form, right? And even that's limited. And, in the early parts of the game, it's not so easy to replenish energy. You may go long spouts without it. So you have to find ways to use echoes to your advantage and kind of learn your way around this game's combat. And you have to think creative in every single encounter, not just boss encounters. And so it's really something that challenges the player even in mundane encounters, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, because it keeps it interesting. It keeps you on your toes, and after a while, if you're playing a Zelda game, you get used to how Link fights, and you start dominating enemies with no problem. But with Zelda, you have to figure out unique ways to challenge difficult enemies and difficult environments, and it's different every time because you're in a different environment or you have a different amount of enemies that you've got to conquer, and sometimes they may wipe out an echo the second you spawn it. I can't tell you how many times that happened to me, especially in boss encounters. It's almost like the AI is programmed to fuck your echo up the second you drop it.
100%. And, yeah, they do manage to keep you on your toes the whole time because, yeah, you'll eventually start to learn the game and the way that it works, and you'll figure out a strategy, or you'll have a really good echo, but the game still manages to keep you on your toes by introducing enemies that aren't going to fall as easily victim to those strategies, and just constantly changing it up. Even the different dungeons, every dungeon is going to have a particular echo or a couple of echoes that are central to that dungeon's main gimmick and are going to enable you to progress. So you'll gain some helpful echoes just progressing along the game's story, in addition to just exploring the world. And just know that in certain areas you're going to have enemies or puzzles that are going to challenge your use of those, because the game knows what echoes are useful, especially, what echoes are useful in what areas. And so the game design reflects that and consistently provides a challenge throughout.
When Link is stolen away, it's up to Princess Zelda to save her kingdom in a brand new entry in the Legend of Zelda series. The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. This sprawling, vibrant land is Hyrule. In the middle of a great field sits Hyrule Castle, surrounded by Hyrule Castletown. This land contains several different regions, including a desert, wetlands, a volcano, and sparkling waters, all of which are inhabited by their own distinct denizens. Mysterious rifts have appeared, tearing the land apart and swallowing up its inhabitants, including the King of Hyrule and Link. Left behind, Zelda meets an ethereal creature called Tri, who gives her a mysterious staff called the Tri-Rod. They then set off on a journey to save Hyrule. Using the Tri-Rod, you can create imitations of things called echoes. Once you learn an echo, you can recreate it whenever you'd like. You can create echoes of useful objects, such as beds, or create echoes of monsters that'll fight by your side. There's a wide range of echoes, and a variety of ways you can put them to use. From finding imaginative paths forward, to fighting your way across the land of Hyrule. Another ability granted by Tri is called Bind. Use it to make certain objects match Zelda's movement. Alternatively, you can use Reverse Bond on a moving object to follow its path. Whether you're moving an object or moving with one, you're bound to come up with all sorts of ideas if you let your imagination run wild. Zelda can also take on Sword Fighter form, allowing her to forge ahead when the path is blocked, strike down enemies, or battle alongside echoes. However, she can only stay in Sword Fighter form for a short period of time. How you choose to wield this power is up to you. The sword's gauge can be replenished by collecting energy found in the still world. Zelda can also make use of wind-up gizmos called automatons. Try combining everything at your disposal to discover strategies and ways forward you might not have considered before. Zelda's wisdom and your creativity are the keys to this adventure. You'll come across many quirky characters during your travels. Keep track of quests they give you by browsing your adventure log whenever you'd like. Helping people with their troubles is a big part of your journey. And wise heroes are often rewarded for their good deeds. To aid you on these quests, you can ride a horse, make smoothies with ingredients you've collected, and obtain accessories or outfits to enhance Zelda's abilities, and to look fashionable, obviously. By stepping into the rifts to save those who have been stolen away, Zelda can explore the still world. She'll have to use echoes to traverse eerie, floating terrain as she ventures into this world's deepest depths. Massive dungeons can also be found in the still world. Zelda will use her wisdom and echoes to take on enemies and puzzles that stand in her way. Then, confront challenging bosses who await her arrival. You'll need to use everything at your disposal to take on these foes, but the strategy is yours to devise. The still world can be accessed through rifts scattered across Hyrule, and each entry point leads to a location with its own defining features. During her journey, Zelda must overcome dungeons within the rifts and the mysteries they hold. Without Link or the King of Hyrule, Hyrule's fate rests squarely in Zelda's hands. On this grand adventure, it's up to Zelda to use her wisdom and save the Kingdom of Hyrule as only she can. The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Available September 26th, only on the Nintendo Switch system. Pre-orders are available now on Nintendo eShop. Nintendo Switch Online members can save on this game with Nintendo Switch game vouchers. The Nintendo Switch Lite Hyrule Edition system is also available for pre-order and will launch September 26th.
Dude, and that kind of leads me to my next thought process, which a lot of people had issues with these with both Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, which I will never stop harping on these games. Simply because my favorite part of a Zelda game, besides the story, are the dungeons themselves. The challenges that are placed in front of Link, and in this case, Zelda. The best part of a Zelda game is a really challenging, puzzle-filled dungeon that allows the player to explore and be impressed and intrigued and drawn to what's going on in the dungeon while also being challenging and giving the player a specific type of puzzle or type of enemy to get past so that they can progress and face the boss at the end of the dungeon. I think that Echoes of Wisdom brilliantly combined the old school traditional linear dungeon format, the open-ended feel of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild,
Yes,
and combined them in a beautiful way. The only issue that I had with the dungeons were I wish they were a little bit longer. They weren't super short, but they weren't as intensive or as lengthy as older dungeons. Like if you've played games like Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, those dungeons are long and they're jam packed. And at the end of those dungeons, you're so relieved and so happy to finally be at that boss door that you're eager to go inside and face the boss. With Echoes of Wisdom, you're still excited to get to that boss door, and some of the best boss fights in the entire series take place in this game. I will stand by that statement.
Oh yeah, each boss encounter seems to revolve around key echoes that you've gained in that dungeon and in that area, as well as the sword fighter form. And in some dungeons, you'll have, it's kind of like the equivalent of a dungeon item, a particular sword fighter form. Or you can even kind of think of the echoes themselves as dungeon items. So they managed to adhere to that design philosophy of traditional Zelda games, even with the boss encounters, but still leaving it open-ended to where, what enemy are you going to use to inflict the most damage per second? And you can even kind of play with the system a little bit, because the game allows you to basically infinitely respawn these things, provided you have enough triangle power to do it.
Yep.
But what's interesting about that is that you can continually resummon the same enemy, even if it makes the other one disappear because you don't need it anymore. So you can kind of learn all of these echoes fighting styles and how long it takes for each one to attack and how they attack, and work around that. And so you can just continually summon, just like sword moblins up in the enemy's grill and keep dealing damage using just that first hit and then just resummoning it. without having to wait for the wind up. So if you get frustrated with the game design early on in the combat, there's a way to work around the system and learn how to use it. Or you can get that nice ball and chain Dark Nut that that fucking swings the ball and chain around.
Hey man, if you ain't choking, you ain't smoking. Oh, but man, no, like I completely and totally agree. I think that the echoes provide a fresh way of interacting with bosses because you can use echoes that are pretty good at taking out these bosses, and you can end the fights quickly, or you can use smaller echoes that make it a significantly bigger challenge. There was one boss that I won't bring up because that would be a spoiler. It like crawled on the walls and stuff like that, and that boss beat my ass like twice because it was different. It was difficult, and you had to be precise in how you spawned it, when you spawned an echo that could take it out, and I think that the boss designs in this game were fantastic.
Yeah, because you've got to deal with not only figuring out the right echo to use, when to utilize the sword fighter form, but you've also got to deal with environmental hazards or respawning enemies in the middle of these fights. And so you're always on your toes. And Zelda isn't a direct attacker, so you kind of just got to find ways to work around that. And the smoothies help out if you actually kind of invest time into that system. There's a handful of useful effects that can work, as well as the accessories. God, the accessory that lets you jump high as quick is a permanent selection in my equipment.
Yes. Dude, I literally, once I got that shit, I never took it off, bro.
Same.
And it's fantastic because there's a box echo that you can get in the game that without that attachment or without that piece of equipment, you can't jump onto it, but with it, you can clear that space and you can move around the world so much easier. You can actually clear moblins in a single bounce and get behind them and spawn critters to take them out. And it's awesome the way that outfits actually feel beneficial in this game. And another thing that I really appreciated is how well the quest system was done. It felt very streamlined and very well organized, and the side quests actually felt worth a damn in this game. They actually felt like they were fun to do and challenging, and there was, like I'm telling you, there's so many callbacks to previous titles in how you interact with the people and the overworld and all that stuff that we'll dive into next time. But oh boy, I was so furious in Breath and Tears with the side quest system and how basically it was like, go collect 10 fireflies and bring them back to me. Or, ooh, that sword catches fire. Let me see that. And that was a whole side quest. You don't have any bullshit like that in Echoes of Wisdom. These side quests actually require time and effort. And I really appreciate that. And also, heart pieces are back.
Heart pieces are back.
I love that, dude. Heart piece quests are so much fun, and actually there were a couple of heart pieces where Danielle and I worked together to figure out how the fuck to get to it.
There is just something about that traditional Zelda element of just finding a heart piece in the wild and trying to find a solution to get to it. Sometimes you have to think about it later, and thankfully this game has the same pin markers from the open world games, which is useful for saying like, okay, hey, there's a piece of heart here that I can come back to later. A problem that becomes less so as you progress through the game and just have more useful echoes. But just the thrill of seeing a heart piece and just trying to figure out like how you're gonna get it is something that I didn't realize I missed. Like it's just not quite the same in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom where you might solve a puzzle in the overworld which gives you a shrine, and you're like, okay, yeah, there's a shrine. So you're basically getting the equivalent of a piece of heart or a part of a stamina wheel here. But you have to kind of load into this whole other area and do a whole other mini dungeon in order to get to it. So it doesn't hit quite the same as Pieces of Heart do.
Yeah, no, I sorely missed Pieces of Heart, and seeing them on the main cover art for the game, there's literally a piece of heart on top of a pillar right in front of Link in the background. It's so awesome, and that gave me so much hope for this title, and it did not disappoint. I was very happy with hunting for Pieces of Heart in this game. And I really hope that they bring them back in the 3D games, because some of the best side quests end in getting a piece of heart in some of those 3D titles. Especially one of my favorite ones that I will never forget is when you're playing Skyward Sword, and it's the first time you go to the Lumpy Pumpkin, and you see a piece of heart on top of the chandelier that the owner just bought and paid for. And you have to roll into, it's not really a side quest, but it's just you getting a piece of heart by rolling into the wall until the chandelier falls and shatters. It's hysterical. And he's like, huh? And like sends you on.
You're so used to just playing Zelda games and being able to throw pots in people's houses, and you're like, yeah, it's a piece of heart. I need to get it. You know, that you don't.
But you are punished.
You're like, okay, yeah, I could do it. And he even warns you about it, but you're like, yeah, what is he really going to do?
And he shows you.
Yeah. Which is funny because, you know, you can just ignore that whole like side quest, but it's actually worth it to complete it and pay your punishment. But yeah, there is just something about just finding these things in the environment. That
you get gratitude crystals for finishing that, right?
Yeah.
I thought so. I thought I remembered that correctly.
Yeah, I believe so.
Speaking of Skyward Sword, upon the release of Black Ops 2, I'm actually going to start streaming a lot. And one of the first story games that I'm going to play is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, because canonically, it's the first game in the timeline. And so very soon, within the next couple of weeks, you guys will probably see me destroy that very chandelier. So once I get started, when we do the next episode, I'll plug it in, and Ash will probably be joining me for a lot of the streams, and we're just going to have a great time. And this weekend will actually be my first stream, and Ash will be right next to me in this little office with his PS5, and we're going to be playing Call of Duty together. I'm incredibly stoked. But back on the topic of Echoes of Wisdom, one other thing that I really, really enjoyed was how unique and how breathtaking the environments were. Hyrule is beautiful in this game, and it is so vibrant. Like the Gerudo Desert is just so... It's just so adventurous and full of life. The Jabul Waters the water is so good. If Nintendo's going to do something right, it's fucking water.
It's water.
I'm telling you, man. Nintendo's got some thirsty motherfuckers in that company because they do water right.
I know. Yeah, just all the different locales, you know, going from like the river Zoras to the sea Zoras and seeing their relationship and the Gerudo and the Gorons. And I also like that the map is the same map basically from A Link to the Past and Link Between Worlds, but expanded. And it did take some cues from the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom map in terms of geography, but it actually feels like a natural expansion of that original map, which leads to my theory of where this game takes place in the timeline.
Absolutely.
Which is... this has got to take place somewhere in relation to A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds, just because the geography of Hyrule is so similar. So yeah. I think it's a foregone conclusion that this is in the Downfall timeline, if the timeline even matters anymore.
I don't. Is it in the Downfall timeline?
It has to be, because it's so similar to A Link to the Past. It's definitely meant to take some place somewhere close to it. So in my opinion, this would be sometime after A Link Between Worlds, some couple hundred years after that, maybe at the most, because we're looking at a Hyrule that's very, very similar in terms of geography, and that was intentional.
Yeah, you know what? Now that I think about it, you're right, and I'm excited to see where they officially place it, just to see if they can mess with anybody's head, because there's a piece of information that you learn in this game that will make your jaw drop, because Zelda has never touched on it before. And it's really exciting, and I'm sure you and I will deep dive into it the next time we get into it. But the sheer amount of lore dumping that they do in this game, and I'll say it again, callbacks. So many good callbacks.
We're going to have to find an excuse to talk about this game in particular again. I mean, this is just a game launch review, so we're not doing a spoiler review planned anytime soon. But maybe at the year and in review, we can kind of get into our full thoughts with this, or maybe we can stream this game, or there's got to be an excuse to get into some of the juicier stuff of Echoes of Wisdom.
Hey, at some point, we're going to get this new Nintendo console, and I guarantee you we're going to get a stable version of these games, because it's going to be backwards compatible. and the hardware is going to run these games the way they were meant to be played. I guarantee you, we'll be able to play Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild in like full 1080p or 4K 60 FPS. And dude, what they do with these games, oh my god, I'm so ready. Oh my gosh.
My body is ready.
My body is so ready, dude. Also, mini games make a triumphant comeback in Echoes of Wisdom. There's a lot of fun stuff to do. There's a lot of puzzles and like events that you can do to interact with people in the world. I don't want to give away too much, but there is a form of racing that you can do, which is a lot of fun. I think it's
fuck the horse races though, because here's the thing. Okay, so you think, okay, it's just a horse race, whatever, you know. All I got to do is play through the course a couple times. I'll learn it and I'll be able to get through it under the target time. But no, you actually have to here's a piece of advice. You have to actually fuck with the game's mechanics a little bit in order to get those under time. So you're gonna. It didn't occur to me to use things like the bind ability while I was riding horseback or spawn an echo. But that's exactly what you should do in order to get under time in those. Once I figured out that, it wasn't too difficult. But man, I remember doing that horse race several times, just thinking, I'm doing this perfectly. How am I not under time?
You know what's crazy? I actually never used echoes to win those races, and I got them under time and got all the rewards. So I guess I'm just the greatest of all time.
I guess so. No. Then that last one, I mean, you have to at least like move an object with bind, or it won't work. That's the other tool in Zelda's wheelhouse here, is the bind and reverse bind abilities, which are really nice and can work with the echoes. So with the bind ability, you can move objects freely, kind of similar to Ultra Hand, just not with nearly as much freedom of movement. But you can kind of fuck with the game's lateral movement system and learn how to game it in order to move objects closer or further away from you just by using the boundaries of the stage and whatnot. But you have that, and then you also have reverse bind, which has Zelda Zelda be motionless while she follows the path of the echo or item that you're bound to. And that's actually where you're going to be able to start fucking with the game a little bit and be able to gain access to areas. And it's one of those gray areas where you're not quite sure how much of it is intended, but it's like, okay, yeah, you're going to spawn an echo that can climb up a wall indefinitely. I can reverse bind to that and be wherever I want. There's also just clever use of echoes that once you learn, you kind of hit yourself over the head and you're like, why didn't I think of that? Like there's a flying tile echo. I got that. And I thought, okay, I don't think I'll really use it, but that's kind of cool that you can spawn the flying tile that we've had to deal with in so many Zelda games. But the
tile that comes up off the floor and flies at you.
Yeah, it never occurred to me that you can jump on top of that tile in order to get across chasms. And so there's a way to get horizontal movement.
Yeah.
I've even seen some crazy shit that people have been doing that reminds me of Tears of the Kingdom, where you just using certain echoes and making kind of these contraptions with them.
Oh, dude, it's spectacular. And I actually think it's called reverse bond. I think it's bind and reverse bond, which is so stupid. But that's, Nintendo throwing out their bullshit. But it's fine.
Also, can we talk about the opening of this game?
Oh, dude. Top fucking tier. Top tier.
Yeah, so you start out as Link in what I presume is the end of his adventure. This is a Link who's like, you're going to get some callbacks to Tears of the Kingdom with this, because you start with full health, and he starts with a set of items. He's already got a powerful sword, a bow, and bombs. And I think all of those are at least the 2-tier upgrade when you play them as Link in terms of function.
The bow is fully upgraded.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, the bow is fully upgraded.
Yeah, so in the opening moments of the game, you have access to full health, a bunch of items. So we clearly are getting a Link that's near the end of his own adventure. It's just we've seen it a dozen times. We don't need to see it again. And he fights Ganon. It's got to be the easiest Ganon fight of all time, but
worth it.
Yeah, and so you actually, I thought that was kind of cool. Is in the very beginning of the game, we play a Link who is at the end of another adventure, and he rescues the princess. but then gets caught in a rift himself, and and now she has to rescue him. And so, like, what a wonderful way to open the game, and also subvert expectations about the Zelda
Yep.
experience.
I will say though, Link in this game is a badass. I really appreciate what they did with Link in this game because they prove why he is, part of the Triforce. They prove why he is the hero of legend, And I like how they don't really nerf him in this game, and I really appreciate what they did with him because you see Link do some incredible stuff at the beginning of the game, which is as it should be. So also the movement is fantastic. It's fluid in this game. You can actually Z target in this game, which is spectacular. It's the first time we've seen Z targeting in a 2-dimensional Zelda, but it makes combat a lot more focused. It makes it a lot more fluid. And it honestly makes interacting with things 10 times easier because you can pretty much lock onto anything.
Yeah.
Echoes, people, enemies, bosses, you name it. You can latch onto it.
And you can jump. So they're definitely, that's what I like about how they've taken the 2D Zelda formula and they turned it on its head and added in all of these elements of modern Zelda games, and what is honestly just a perfect fusion, and it's beautiful.
It really is. And to be honest, I had my doubts about this game. I really did, but it didn't disappoint. And granted, I will want to play with Link in these big 3D games unless they can somehow make it to where you can play as both, like switching between or working with Zelda or Zelda working with Link on big puzzles and dungeons and stuff like that. But they did justice for those who were truly wanting a Legend of Zelda title where Zelda is the main character. They did justice, and now Wand of Gamelon is not the only curse.
You're forgetting Zelda's Adventure.
I don't want to talk about that, Ash.
Yeah, and what's cool is at first this kind of just seems like a subversion of the hero rescues the princess trope, and okay, you might be worried that it's going to be some kind of girl boss thing, but I think at the end of the day the message is that here in this adventure Link and Zelda are equals. And
yes, they are.
That's an interesting place to put her for future installments, and I'm interested to see where Nintendo takes that, because there's just some really, really beautiful things that oh God, I don't want to spoil the ending, but there's some really, really cool stuff they do at the ending that I wish that we could see more of. Gameplay,
absolutely,
things that honestly it's just limited to like that final dungeon and that final boss battle, and I kind of wish we got more of that because they do some really cool fucking shit.
Yes, they do, bro. It's nuts. Danielle and I were going crazy. We were like, dude, this is wicked. And some of those puzzles in the last one are really challenging, and you have to think outside the box.
Yes.
And so I really appreciate that. But all in all, I really enjoyed playing through Echoes of Wisdom. I know Ash 100% completed it, and
almost.
I finished. I finished the story. I didn't find everything, but I got my money's worth out of it, and I'm really excited to see where they take the series from here. I guarantee you we'll probably do a spoiler review on this at some time. Like Ash said, we'll probably talk about it at the year-end review. But there's not really much more that we could dive into without giving something away.
One thing actually,
go ahead.
A criticism, actually a couple. I have two. I don't want to take my platform to use. One, they haven't fixed the UI yet. There's a kind of an issue with the UI in Breath of the Wild, and especially Tears of the Kingdom, where yes, they allow you to sort it, but it's too difficult to find exactly what you need in some situations, and that's the same thing here in Echoes of Wisdom. Maybe they pretty much just copy-pasted the UI, which is fine, it works, but sometimes finding that one echo that you need is a little bit more difficult than it needs to be, and it's nice that you can sort it around and usually find what you're looking for without too much trouble, but every once in a while it did get annoying, and it made me wish that there was at least like a favorite option. Let me favorite some of my echoes, and that way I can always have them at a moment's notice, even if I haven't used them in a while, or maybe haven't used them particularly much in the game as a whole, but they're useful for this area. So if there was some kind of way to just favorite echoes, that would carry the game tremendously. And if Grezzo has the opportunity to come back in and add something like that in a patch, chef's kiss. But if they're gonna
Absolutely.
if they're gonna patch anything, here's what they need to patch: Hoodless Zelda. There was a movement going on Twitter. Apparently, there's a few YouTubers and gamers that are in on this. But there's a movement on right now to convince Grezzo to patch in the Hoodless Zelda outfit into the game. That's on the box art. So
yeah, and she takes off her hood sometimes in the game, and it's a really sick look.
But you only get it for basically 2 minutes of the game, and then it's gone. So if you go follow #HoodlessZelda on Twitter, I think there's a movement going on October 31st where fans are going to reach out to Grezzo. The suggestion is to approach them with respect and to approach them from a standpoint of, hey, I really, really love this product, or I really love this thing that you did, and it would be really great if you would add this and add the #HoodlessZelda.
If we're being honest, every single instance talking to somebody that created something, unless that something is meant to hurt people, it should always be approached with respect. So if you are going to take part in that Hoodless Zelda trend, just because of what you've heard on this, we ask that you are respectful. Because Grezzo is an amazing team, and they put in a lot of work to make this game happen. And honestly, if they didn't put Hoodless Zelda in the game because it adds no benefit to her abilities at all, it's not something people should be upset about, but that would be fucking awesome to have the option to walk around with Hoodless Zelda, because it's a sick look.
Yeah. I actually I main the mid game outfit. There's an outfit you get after the first 4 dungeons that I think is meant to be the default outfit at that point.
Yep, that's what I do too.
But then there are some outfits that actually have abilities. Nothing that's super useful. Most of them are cosmetic. I think there's only a couple of them that have abilities at all. But you know, it was nice that you could equip pieces of clothing that might have this or that effect, and then just some other ones for fun.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% in agreement there. I think the outfits are not overwhelming, and they're really, really fun to use, and cosmetically they look great. You can really appreciate them.
It's actually the accessories where you're actually going to get some effects that actually kind of affect the game. But the costumes were fun, and that was a nice addition, a nice carryover from the open world games, along with, you know, like the smoothie system, which, you know, definitely harkens back to that cooking system, which was cool. It's really awesome how they were able to marry these ideas to what is otherwise a traditional Zelda adventure.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, it's like half and half, right? You know, you've got the dungeons are linear, mostly, and the level design adheres to the tried and true formulas, but they've also added in, you know, the echoes as a gimmick, and various other things that blend in that open worldness. So it kind of appeals to Zelda fans in both camps, which is really, really nice. It's honestly the best thing that they could have done.
I mean, Hannah Montana said it best, brother. You get the best of both worlds.
Yes.
Makes it all together, and you know that it's the best of both worlds.
But what are the worlds? Are they Hyrule and Lorule? Are they the light world and the dark world? Are they the past and the present?
Whatever it is, links between them. But yeah, no, if you haven't had the chance to go experience Echoes of Wisdom, highly recommend it. For whatever small faults that it has, albeit UI and some lackluster rewards in the game, it's worth your time and effort. It is a great time, and you will not be disappointed whatsoever. Yeah, some performance issues, but I mean, it's
minor.
The Switch. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? Yeah.
Yeah, less than 18-year-old performance issues. They're just minor. Sorry, that's a shitty joke. But, you know, I think we're probably going to wrap this up because there's not much more that we can dive into without spoiling the game.
Yeah.
But, dude, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, first impressions, I loved it. I had my doubts, but they were quickly squashed when I got into it. I cleared the game in less than a week, and that was even though we were dealing with a hurricane too, because Danielle and I were without power for a week and without internet for 2. So Echoes of Wisdom really helped me out by being this fun little game that I could take everywhere and play everywhere, and I really enjoyed it. The Switch is nearing the end of its cycle, and I'm very glad that we're going to get some bangers to end it out. And hopefully this new console brings about a new era of Nintendo that is just far superior to anything they've done so far.
Hell yeah.
So, but I mean, Ash, what are your final thoughts, man? Is there anything else that you want to add before we get out of here?
Yeah, just overall, it's a fantastic little condensed experience. Definitely something that we needed in the Zelda community. A welcome surprise, a surprise, but a welcome one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, kudos to Grezzo for churning this out with what I assume was a very quick development time and producing a product as polished as this, even with a couple minor issues. So I definitely recommend this to just about anyone, especially Zelda fans. This is especially fans of traditional Zelda that were missing that, and even to fans of the new open world Zelda format. And we're in both camps. I mean, I don't think there's a Zelda game that's ever come out besides the CDI ones that is anything less than a masterpiece. But this,
I mean, Zelda 2 exists, but we won't talk about that.
Okay, there's Zelda 2. That's it's just a very different thing, right? But yeah, I mean, this has honestly got to go high up in the rankings of any Zelda game. I mean, just a really creative concept. Creativity is the game here. That's a trend that's moving from Tears of the Kingdom, but what we've shown is that they've listened to the fans. They've listened to the criticisms, and they've actually adjusted. So that's great news. No matter,
I couldn't have said it better myself, brother.
No matter what camp that you're in, when you listen to the fans and adjust your product as a result, I mean, I don't care what you think about any of the recent games. That's good news. That's
Absolutely.
a good thing.
It's a step in the right direction, which is something that was sorely needed.
Yeah. And
I'm really excited for the future of the series, because when it comes to The Legend of Zelda, you deserve nothing less than the very best.
100%.
So, but yeah, no, I think that's pretty much going to do it. Yeah, I guess we can get out of here. But I mean,
yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, leave us a review, and you can also support the show on Buy Me a Coffee, and you can also check out our Patreon, where we have exclusive Let's Play game commentaries. Also, you can check out our merch store on TeePublic and get you some Collateral Media swag.
Absolutely, dude. That's going to be pretty dope.
we're on all podcast platforms, and we're on social media as well. And stay tuned for season 7 of Collateral Cinema. We'll be opening up with Doom 1993. And actually, by the time that this is out, that should be out if everything goes to plan. So stick around for part 2 of our season premiere, where we'll be talking about Doom 2016. And then we'll finally be able to get into our spooky season content. So hopefully by the end of the month, I'm planning to at least get part 1 of our Silent Hill 2 review out, which will be our spoiler-free take on the game. And then our Halloween special, of course, on Amnesia: The Dark Descent. I just started playing that today, and it's terrifying.
Oh, yeah. Good time.
And then Bo and I will be talking about Parasite Eve on the Halloween edition of the Director's Cut. So that's what I'm hoping to get out by the end of October. And then, of course, early next month, we should have out our game launch review on Black Ops 6. And Zach and I are going to be on that. We're going to be recording that together. Also, my buddy Michael Toscano, who was on our Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree episode, will be joining us for that as well.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a good time. And honestly, dude, I'm so stoked for you to be out here. Just a few short days now.
I know.
We're going to have a rocking weekend, man. It's going to be a good time. But we appreciate everybody for tuning in and listening. With that being said, I'm Zachary Guillo.
And I'm Ashley Chancellor.
We are Collateral Gaming, and we are out.
Collateral Gaming is a Collateral Media podcast. All music and game clips are owned by their respective creators and are used for educational purposes only. Please don't sue us. We're poor.